Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into one of the biggest questions in theology, and we're doing it through the lens of one of its heaviest hitters, John Calvin. So let's just jump right in with a question that, on the surface, seems pretty simple. But for the 16th century theologian John Calvin, the answer to this flips our entire understanding of righteousness on its head. He basically argues that our gut instinct here is fundamentally wrong. Let's find out why. Okay, so to really get what Calvin's arguing, we first have to see the problem the way he saw it. Before he can build his case for what makes someone righteous, he first has to tear down the idea that anyone can be righteous on their own steam. Calvin starts out, very methodically. He sorts all of humanity into 4 distinct categories. He does this to figure out who, if anyone, could actually be considered righteous in the eyes of a perfectly holy God. This whole framework is absolutely key to his argument. And right away, Calvin starts taking a sledgehammer to our usual assumptions. He says that for those first 3 groups, the ignorant, the nominal, and the hypocrites, even their most amazing virtues, things like courage or justice, they're all fundamentally flawed. Why? Because they don't come from the right place. And here's the knockout punch. For Calvin, the motive is everything. If the goal isn't to serve and glorify God, then even the most celebrated deeds of famous historical figures, people like Scipio or Cato, were ultimately just sins in his book. They were doing things for ambition or for self-love, but not for God. So this leads to a massive question, right? Why does Calvin think that even our best, most sincere efforts to be good people are just doomed to fail? I mean, if we're really trying our best, shouldn't that count for something? Well, Calvin points to 2 massive problems, 2 hurdles that he says are just impossible for any human to clear on their own. First off, he says God's law isn't graded on a curve. It's not looking for mostly good or, a solid effort. It demands absolute, flawless, nonstop obedience right from the heart. One single slip-up and the whole project is shattered. He pulls this quote from the Apostle James, arguing that the law is this one unified thing. You break one part, you've broken the whole thing, period. So that means even one tiny sin is enough to completely wipe out any record of past goodness, which makes achieving perfection on our own, well, impossible. And second, and this is really the core of his diagnosis, Calvin says an impure source always contaminates the result. We tend to think, hey, a good deed is a good deed. But Calvin says, not so fast. You have to look at where it's coming from, the human heart. He uses this really powerful analogy. Just like an unclean hand makes a sacred object dirty, a heart that isn't perfectly pure taints even the most noble-looking action. The deed might look great on the outside, but its source makes it totally unacceptable to a holy God. And get this applies to everyone, even the regenerated, that 4th group from his list. Calvin says that even the best work from the most holy person you can possibly imagine still has enough hidden selfishness or imperfection in it to deserve condemnation under God's perfect standard. So, if all our efforts are doomed to fail, how in the world can anyone be made right with God? Well, after tearing down the idea of earning salvation, Calvin presents what he sees as the only possible solution. For Calvin, the answer isn't about achieving righteousness, it's about receiving it. See, justification isn't a self-improvement project. It's a legal declaration from God. It's not based on what we've done, but on what Christ has done for us, and we accept it simply by faith. He breaks it down almost like a scientific formula. The source, God's mercy. The substance, Christ's perfect life. The way we get it, faith. And the ultimate goal, to show off God's glory. Now notice what's missing from that list. Our works. They're just not part of the equation. This is basically the great exchange at the heart of Calvin's theology. It's like our record of sin and failure gets put on Christ's account, and his perfect record of righteousness gets credited to ours. So in God's eyes, we're seen as perfect because we are, in a sense, wearing the perfection of Christ. Okay, but this brings up a really obvious and critical question. If our works don't save us, then why bother trying to be good at all, right? Doesn't this whole idea just lead to a life of who cares? Calvin says absolutely not. And this might be one of the most important distinctions he makes. Calvin is crystal clear on this. Good works are not the cause of our salvation. They are the necessary evidence of it. They don't make the tree alive. They just prove that the tree is already alive. So for the believer, good works get a totally new job description. They aren't a currency you use to try and buy God's favor. Instead, they act as signs. They confirm that your faith is real, they boost your own assurance, and they show that God's Spirit is genuinely changing you from the inside out. So here's the bottom line. Good works flow out of a changed heart as a joyful thank you for grace. They're the natural result of being saved, not the stressful requirement for trying to get saved. The whole motivation flips from fear to gratitude. Calvin wraps this all up beautifully by quoting Augustine. The prayer basically shifts from, hey, look at my good deeds, to, God, look at what you have done in me. It's about putting all your confidence not in your own messy efforts, but in God's perfect work. And this really shows the radical shift at the core of his whole argument. It takes the focus completely off of our performance and puts it squarely onto divine grace. It just turns our whole understanding of salvation on its head. It's a pretty profound change in perspective, one that has echoed for centuries through theology and philosophy, and it leaves us with a big question to chew on today. It challenges us to rethink not just how we see God, but how we see ourselves and all of our own efforts.